Hey everybody, how you doing? This is Amit again for another episode of Orders and Junctions. I am actually speaking today with a former colleague slash executive at a company I used to work with in LA, Darren Ehlers. He is actually an interesting fellow. We'll talk about that obviously, but he lives in Park City, Utah, has offices in San Francisco and LA, and he's pretty much a road warrior and has been some for a while. But he's been in a variety of industries. He's been in the tech industry, but in a bunch of different spaces. So what he does is interesting, has been interesting, and I'm always curious to know how he fell into this area. So we're talking to Darren today from his home in Park City, Utah, and there he is. Darren, how you doing?
Good, Amit. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to share my experiences.
That's
you
all.
know, the what's fun about I think everything that I've done is it's never really gone by any kind of set plan. It's always just kind of evolved. And starting even just what I did right out of college. I have a degree in civil engineering that I used literally for 3 months, and then got into software and just a whole series of events led to starting a company that wasn't focused on entertainment industry, but after a couple of years we found this niche, solved it, and now we're at the largest technology company for Hollywood.
All right. Well, all right. So there's a lot going on there as well,
That's a big span.
and we've actually Darren and I have talked about some of this in the past in general conversation. But let me try and walk through some general steps itself. So you're from where originally?
Grew up in the Northeast, Philadelphia and Connecticut.
Siblings or otherwise, or your only child?
Have a sister that lives in Colorado now. And then my parents got divorced, my dad got remarried, and he had two more kids. So I've got a half brother and half sister, both in Connecticut.
Okay, and then I see your hat. So did you go to Colorado as well?
I went to Colorado, yes.
Okay, so you're from the East Coast. You went to school in Colorado, and then you started work out of school in civil engineering that you studied for, or switched over to
So I
tech?
worked for a lighting manufacturing company, actually, in a very industrial town in northern New Jersey, and called Zumtobel. They're a
Okay.
German company. And then literally did that for 6 months, and then moved to San Francisco and got into technology.
Okay, now how does one just get it? Did you go back to school for that? Or you kind of just learned on the fly, or how does that work?
As part of the degree in the civil engineering curriculum, you do a lot of programming, and so I was self-taught. I did take some programming classes, but was self-taught. But realized after a little while, the at the time that I moved to San Francisco, the whole client server, consulting market was kind of exploding. So you had a lot of client applications being developed in Visual Basic, which was a pretty easy language to pick up on your own. And so I did that for a couple of years, but then realized that while I could solve things, I wasn't really a coder per se. I was kind of winging it.
So, all right, and I remember VB. I used to do some work in that back in the day as well.
Real programmers would call me a hacker. So but what I realized that I really liked doing, actually more so than really coding, was solving problems. And so so there was that, and then realizing that too, that the engineers that were developing stuff weren't really getting good inputs. And so they're wasting a lot of time and a lot of money. There's a lot of frustration from the business users because they never got what they wanted. So
Now, you're doing this all when you're working for a company, I assume, as on a consulting basis, or are you doing this when you were working for like how did you at what level did you enter this coding space or this hacking space as you called it?
just as a contractor, yeah. So I got a job as a contract position with PG&E, actually in San Francisco. They're the big utility for Northern California, gas and electric, and got a bunch of requirements for the guy that I was reporting to build this application for some folks. Spent a year building it, then we went to the big demo to show it to them, and they were like, "This doesn't do anything that we asked you to do." So it quickly became clear that there was a big gap between what business users wanted and what technology was delivering, and that's evolved over the years into the agile processes we have today. But at the time, product management really wasn't. It was more of a consumer goods function, mm-hmm. right? How do you product manage, Folgers coffee and dish soap and stuff like that, Coke and Pepsi. That was kind of more the product management level of functionality. And it wasn't really until software technologies became much more rapidly developable that you started really needing more. You needed more product management, and B, it started to show the cracks in the waterfall approach to software delivery.
Now, at this point, where you're kind of, I guess, coming to this realization, if you will, are you married yet, or are you still a single guy trying to figure it all out for yourself?
Where was I? I was married. Yes, my wife and I were living in San Francisco together.
So, did you guys meet in San Francisco, or she moved with you from Jersey?
We did. She was a East Coast transplant as well. Met at one of the summer street fairs in San Francisco.
Not bad.
And but it was funny going to San Francisco and ended up hanging out with a bunch of East Coasters.
Well, I have a lot of friends of mine doing that right now, and I'm in New York hanging out with a bunch of West Coasters, so I totally understand that game. So you're doing this. You're working for PG&E, and then you're figuring out all these various gaps in the current process flow, etc. So did you, and I know that you obviously went out eventually on your own, but was this the genesis of that thought process to go, hey, I can do this myself? Or how did the progression work from there to taking the chance to do your own thing?
No, I went through 2 more companies after PG&E. So I went and worked for a custom software development company that did a lot of work for New York Life. So I actually went back and forth a lot between San Francisco and Manhattan. And then, in fact, moved to Manhattan for 6 months to work there. Saw all the same problems again. And then the internet boom came, right? So this is 1998, and the internet stuff took off. So I left that company and went to work for a company called Vignette. That was one of the pioneers in how to build, early web applications. Looking back on it now, it's kind of laughable that was history. But at the time there was really no way to do that. So I worked for them for a number of years. That was again back in San Francisco, working with a number of clients through their professional services organization, and then transitioned actually into their product management position. So that was the first time I'd actually become an official product manager.
Which is what you qualify yourself as now?
Yes, yep. So looking back on it, a lot of what I did was product management all along. Just wasn't formally called that. And then moved to Texas and did that for a couple years. Launched a number of successful products with Vignette, and then the bubble burst in 2001, and ended up going to work for a company in Salt Lake. And through all that, it started to kind of get you'd seen a lot of high-flying companies through the internet boom, and it all looked super fun, right? And kind of got the bug of with the right opportunity, would love to take a shot at doing my own thing. Like I said, we moved from Texas to, that's when we moved to Park City right after the Olympics in 2002, and worked for a company out of Salt Lake for a couple years. And then an opportunity came up to start the company that eventually became Scenechronize, and just decided to do it.
All right, so let's pause here real quick. Now, in all these moves itself, your wife is just in tow. Do you have kids at this point as well? And people are just jumping around from New York to Texas?
Yeah, when we moved from San Francisco to Texas, our first son was born, and then our second son was born while we lived in Texas. So she's an attorney. So she had taken some time off when the kids were born, and And but yeah, so we were doing all right, and she wasn't really looking to be power partner in a law firm, and was more interested in at that time staying home with the kids. So we moved to Texas, and we moved up here to Park City, and so we started that company in San Francisco. It was called Clever Machine. Was the corporate.
And this is when you would go back and forth from Park City to San Francisco to work with Clever Machine on building Synchronize.
Yeah, well, actually, we started the company working with a financial services company out of Los Angeles.
All right, hold up. Let me pause here real quick. You started,
Sure.
okay, so you're with a company in Park City. Your wife
Yep,
is there. She is no longer with the law firm. So
that's
she's
right.
now, and so now it's pretty much you are quote unquote the breadwinner at this point.
That's right.
Um, and you decide to leave that company to start with Clever Machine or to work with Clever Machine to build that together, to take
That's right.
that risk in San Francisco and
Yep.
flying back and forth.
Yes, like I said,
You see the why I'm asking the way I'm asking it. Why would somebody?
non-conventional, right?
Yeah,
It
and
was,
that's kind of the thing. It's like
it's, I can't always, describe exactly the decision-making criteria that goes into those pivots, so to speak. But for whatever fortuitous reason, most of them have worked out. And this one obviously did. There was definitely some tough times through all that. But it was a kind of a combination of I really had a burning desire to kind of take a shot, right?
no, I don't want to get too technical, too financially. I don't want to get into your private finances relating to Clever Machine, etc. Right. So if anything that I ask is out of line, just be like, no, I'm not getting into there. But what I'm trying to say is, when you go to start, was it something that you were in essence coming on as an employee or as like an equity partner? Like this was your baby as well. How
Yeah,
was that?
so it was me and one other guy in San Francisco were the founders of the company.
So then your risk at that point is, and I'm trying to understand the risk reward in the scenario. So your risk at
Yeah,
that point is, I'm going in as somebody who I'm going in with my money and my skills, and trying to translate something with somebody else, obviously, but trying to build that into a larger company that's going to sustain me and my family.
that's right.
And Clever Machine. Okay, so real quick for people who don't know, and unless you're really in film and TV, you may not know. So Darren started with Clever Machine. It then became Synchronize, which we'll touch on a little bit. But primarily that product, if you are in production in Hollywood, you are using that product. It's a product everybody knows. It's become literally the standard. And to think from what he was saying, it didn't exist before. Like the whole idea didn't exist, and it was something that he kind of came with him and his partners kind of came up with what is now that solution. But to get there is interesting to me, and Darren and I've had this conversation because it wasn't the intent. The company wasn't supposed to solve an entertainment problem, especially when you started in San Francisco to solve a problem in LA and live in Park City. So, what was Clever Machine supposed to be?
So we started Clever Machine, like I said, with a contract, an outsourcing contract with a financial services company in Los Angeles. They did super complicated deferred compensation plans, and they needed someone to really kind of overhaul their back end systems. So they hired us with a contract that was very lucrative for us, and we overhired the team to serve that contract with people, with the promise that we would do this for 3 years. We would bank all the money, all the profits, as our seed money that we would then turn into a startup after 3 years. So we basically self-funded our own seed development. And the what ended up happening is there was a lot of work in Los Angeles for that contract, and so we hired a project manager to help to be there on site because we were all in San Francisco. And this person just happened to be someone who had worked in Silicon Valley at technology companies, but then moved to LA to pursue their dream to be a producer and a writer, and had seen kind of this information challenge in the production office. So one time when he was up in San Francisco, we were out to dinner and we were talking about, where's the company going? what are the kind of things we want to work on? Where are some problems that we see? And, so he brought this problem to us, said, hey, this is a big, hairy problem. There's no one solving it. And so we looked at it. It wasn't the biggest market, right? We had looked at, bigger markets, but the flip side was there's really no competition, right? So if we could deliver a better solution, we could own the market.
But then you went from a broader scope to literally a small, not I say small loosely because obviously Hollywood's billions of dollars, but I mean small meaning targeted market. And
That's right.
if your product wasn't adopted by said market, that would be the company? I mean, in essence, are you putting all your eggs in one basket?
Absolutely. We did a lot of research to validate the need. So we posted on Craigslist. It said, if you're one of these 5 job descriptions, assistant director, production office coordinator, unit production manager, UPM, there's a couple others. We'll pay you $100 for 90 minutes if you just talk to us about your job. And we did that for 3 months. I think we interviewed 20 or 30 people. And it became very clear that there was a real challenge there, and that the way we were thinking about solving the problem, made a lot of sense to a lot of people. So, there's leaps of faith every one of these steps
obviously.
along the way. And, there's no scorecard that you can, check off all the boxes and get, cross some threshold and say, okay, let's go for it. It's just more intuition. But the more and more we talked to more and more people, everyone was really excited about the fact that we were looking at this problem. And we felt that we had the horses to solve the problem. And so what was funny about it too is that so we set off to do that, and we built the first iterations of Scenechronize, and we kind of hit it about half right. And there's these fortuitous things along the way, and one of these fortuitous things is we had built a product specifically for one segment of the market, the AD market, the assistant director. They do all the scheduling. But we had a free version of the product, and we were watermarking the reports to get them to upgrade. And right at the time that we were doing that, TV was going through a huge transition, right, from multi-camera, sitcoms and kind of cheesy scripted stuff into higher production quality shows, and with that came more confidential scripts. And so this is right around the time of Lost, right? So Lost kind of pioneered this for the networks, right? The ABCs, the CBSs, the Foxes. HBO had already kind of gone down this path, but the networks hadn't really gone down this path. But Lost kind of changed all that. So now all of a sudden you had every network wanting to watermark these scripts because they were, sequential, they were, secret, there was big, cliffhangers and big things. You had a lot of fans. And so we just happened to hit right when that started to explode, and there was no solution for the automated watermarking of that information.
But how does guy from Silicon Valley who has no connections in Hollywood go, hey, Sony, let me get a meeting? And why would Sony give you said meeting?
We went after the productions, actually.
Okay, so for specific shows that they're working on.
Yeah, and it's as big as Hollywood is, it's a fairly small knit pockets of people, right? So if you're a production office coordinator, you're going to do that job for a couple of years, and there's only 200 of them working at any given time. And so if you can get in with that group of people, right, there's a huge word of mouth. They have their own little private networks of they share information. And so we solved this problem for one show, and that production office coordinator told all his production office coordinator friends that, someone's finally built a solution for the production office. You guys should check it out. And it took off from there. So again, the timing was right because they were hiring, multiple people to do this manual watermarking, and it was huge latency from when, information arrived to when information got out. There was all kinds of mistakes and errors. So we automated that whole process.
But it wasn't, but now these are all the good stories, i.e. you came in at the right time, things happened, I got in, worked on a couple shows, etc. And I can only imagine that we were sitting there, and this is my perception, we were sitting there in San Francisco, in Silicon Valley, going, we've got the guy on the ground, we've done research, we know that this is a product that they need. Right? Now, what the market needs versus what the market chooses are two completely different things. Generally, I mean, they may need this thing altogether, but whether or not they buy in, as we've all found out, some people aren't the most technologically savvy, or they don't see value in many things that they've been doing the same way forever and ever and ever. And we see that on film sets all day long. But you had faith that you could sell it to somebody once they saw it. That once they saw this, they would go in and say, yep, I would like to try this out. Were you giving it away to kind of get people hooked, or were you confident enough to charge right off the bat?
Two things. One was luckily no one had been doing watermarking for 20 years. So you're right. There's people that have been doing scheduling. There's people that have been doing budgeting. There's people that have been doing location scouting and casting for 20 years, and they have their ways of doing it. It might not be the most efficient, but it works. No one had been doing this watermarking and distribution stuff. There was no solution. There wasn't any, spreadsheets. There wasn't anything to do any of that stuff. So we didn't have to overcome kind of that hurdle. People immediately saw the value proposition, and it made total sense to them, and it was no threat to them. The pricing proved to be more challenging for sure. Even with all the value add stuff, the problem is, if you're familiar with Hollywood at all, is that if something isn't budgeted up front in the initial budget before the project even gets greenlit, it's really hard, unless the director, wants it for creative purposes, to modify that budget.
Exactly.
And so, Scenechronize was not software for the production office was not something that was budgeted for at all. And so we had to go in and kind of find that sweet spot where we could get, revenue off the shows, through them, only doing, 2 hot lunches a day instead of 5, a week instead of 5 hot lunches a week, right? They would do creative things like that to try and find the money to pay for that. But, we were able to charge for it. Ultimately, you're constrained by how much money you can make off the back of the production office itself. Mm-hmm. That was when we then, once that became really successful, but the revenue model was challenging, that's when we pivoted to the studios.
And I mean, Scenechronize, and for full disclosure itself as well, I used to sell Scenechronize. So I know the system, I use it. I was a user, and then I was actually, when I worked with Darren, would actually sell the product with Darren as well. So I'm very familiar with the system and how the reception was towards it. But going back so you see a gap in the market, you find a solution for a said gap, you're able to get it in and kind of build traction via word of mouth, etc. Now, at this point in time, the 3 years you put in is in essence funding the seed money for building of Scenechronize, etc. So now you're tied to that. So I'm assuming at this point you're not generating enough revenue to support your company and the whole nine based on a couple of productions, not a couple, but based on the productions you have at that slate. So
that's right. We had gone out and raised some external money in San Francisco.
So then you're raising more money to support. So you're raising some debt to support all of what's going on, seeing
right.
the big picture, if you will.
That's right.
Now again, remind everybody, Darren's family is in Park City. He's working in LA and San Francisco. Right, and I keep going back to the finances primarily because, as somebody who is a little more fiscally conservative, in the sense that I'd like to say I take risks, but I mean, I'll move from LA to New York, but I came with a job. It's rare. I've done only a couple moves in my life where I'm like, all right, I'll go on a limb and see what happens. That's a fear to me, or a concern to me, that I would like to inevitably get over. However, which is why I'm fascinated by people who can. Worst case scenario, they're not concerned about where they're going to land. Meaning, I'm confident that worst case scenario, if this goes all up in flames, I can get another gig and I'll be just fine. So that's not the concern. I'm assuming in your level, how did you comfort yourself or get comfort into where this product was going and how much you had to give of yourself to it, and to convince your family to, hey, just stick around, it's all going to work out well?
That's kind of the entrepreneurs, fundamental. That's what makes people start companies and kind of push through the challenges. It's a very strong work ethic to not be denied. You're going to continue to work the problem until you find a path through. And if you don't find a path through, then at least you worked it as hard as you could.
Okay, so what's the difference between that? What's the difference between I can't get in and that's as much as I could? Like when is enough, so to speak? Like you're like, oh, there's one more versus nah, I did as much as I could and being content with that. How do you
Uh,
define that for you?
it's a combination of things. So kind of fast forward. I touched a little bit on the business model was challenging. We did make a pivot to the studios that helped, but still wasn't enough. And so we got to a point where, it became clear that, we couldn't survive anymore on our own, given our cost basis and the revenue opportunities. The studios were just too challenging, and we just didn't have enough leverage over them to get to the price points that we needed to.
And the studios, for people out there who may not know, studios are literally talking about the Fox, the Sonys, the NBCs,
That's
et
right.
cetera, et cetera. All the large production houses that have a slew of production companies underneath them. But if you start working with Fox, for example, then they can, in essence, mandate or filter it down to all the productions across the board versus going for a branch of Fox or a smaller subsection. So that's
Right.
why that's a greater target. Sorry,
That's
continue.
so and it's you get into these companies, you're leading the company, you got employees that have families. There's definitely a fear for your own family, but there's also then fear for the other families that you're responsible for,
Correct,
ultimately as well. And when you get into starting a company, right, you have to do it because you love it, right? If you're there for any other reason, it's not going to succeed because it takes 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all your credit cards.
Oh, see, and that's
Um,
interesting to me right there.
you
Well,
know,
now
and
now in saying love it, but you went in to start a company. Okay, so you're saying love of starting a company and solving a problem, or love of a specific? Because your company initially was not supposed to address anything Hollywood related.
no,
However,
no,
the
yeah,
love for solving a problem, I guess, is what you mean.
yeah.
Is
Well, we had a real we had actually latched onto a real problem, and so that ultimately was the thing I think that kept most of us going. Is that we actually we weren't struggling, right? Still trying to find a product market fit. We had a product market fit. Our challenge was the business model wasn't working, um, and the we had some internal differences of opinion of how to address that, and we had to adjust our corporate um, work, how we did everything, and there were some challenges there. We hit all the challenges that every startup you've ever heard about has hit: funding, differences of opinion, changes in leadership, all those kinds of things.
now how long is that going on though? Like meaning, like what's the timeline of you've got these
Probably,
hurdles like
that
years,
was
months?
2009 to 2012.
So within 3 years, you've got these various hurdles that occur. You've got the funding issue, you've got differences within management, you've got all these things,
That's right.
right? So, and your decision to continue to pursue this was based on your love for the project, or your confidence in you, or a combination thereof.
Yeah, all of the above. Again, I can't necessarily, and I had people coaching me saying, why are you sticking around and continuing to do this?
Yeah, I mean, like, what's your support group at that point? Like, I mean, I'm assuming you come home and you're frustrated at some points or stressed out about, like you said, not just your family but
Absolutely.
everybody else's. So, what kept pushing you to keep going? Was it other people you talked to? Was it riding bicycles, what you do? Was it doing stuff to clear your head?
I ultimately believed that we had the right solution for the market, and that if we could find a business model that worked, that we would be successful. And the at the end of the day, the challenge wasn't, well, actually, at the end of the day, the challenge was, how do we do that, right? Can we dig our way out of it and survive on our own, or do we need to go partner with companies that have a better business model built into their service of the industry? And that was a fundamental difference of opinion amongst various folks that we had to get resolved. That took about a year.
Wow.
And I don't envy anyone ever having to deal with that. But we did it. And then we set down the path of finding a strategic partner. And that culminated in the acquisition by Ease Entertainment Services in November 2012. So 4 years ago.
Which is when I met Darren at that point as well, which is I came on board the following April, I believe.
That's right.
And that's when I met Darren at that point. So you go through all these things, you have all these, we talked about the good points, meaning you found this niche, you found whatever else, you eventually found a company that facilitated your needs by way of a revenue model that worked. But in getting through all these hurdles and this change of regime or this change of direction, if you will, within your company, which I cannot even fathom, how does, like, what literally kept you going? Like, what kept you going in the sense, like, where was your, and I agree, and again, I'm very, I understand the fact that you go, hey, I have a product that can solve the market, but how often can you be your own cheerleader and keep pushing yourself forward versus this is that line and I've done the best I can? Let's take a step back with that. Have you ever said this is the best I can? Like, or are you that person who's ever, in essence, not given up, but just been like, all right, this is as much as I can get out of this one time to move on? Have you ever had to do that?
No, I have never had to abandon something that I started kind of on my own. I've left companies, I've left, jobs.
Mm-hmm.
But for whatever reason, anything that I've put my mind to that says I'm going to accomplish this, right? And when we started Clever Machine, right, the accomplishment was we're not going to fail, right? We will find a way out, whatever that out is. We will find a way out, and it just. That was kind of the driving force, right? Was
No.
I'm not going to fail until failure's the only option.
See, now, and the reason I keep going back to that is because there are a great many people who have tried and failed. There are a great many people who've never tried at all because of fear of failure.
That's right.
Actually, I think the majority are the latter. The majority of people don't try out of fear of failure, right? For whatever reason. What if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong? They think about the negatives first before the positives.
Sure.
Then there are people who, in essence, like yourself, who go, yeah, no, I believe in myself enough to know that I can make this happen, and now I have people counting on me in a variety of levels. Do you feel that was something you got because of the way you were brought up? Do you feel something you got based on things you've experienced throughout life? Or have you always been somebody who's just confident enough in what you can do based on your aptitude and business acumen?
I mean, obviously there's got to be a high degree of self-confidence. No one can do this type of thing without having a high degree of confidence in yourself. So that's number one. Number two is we had a phenomenal team. The software worked. We didn't have a bunch of production issues. We weren't dealing with all kinds of the normal nonsense. So we had a phenomenal team that had built a phenomenal product. And to some degree, I felt like I owed them, right, every last ounce of my effort to find a path forward because they had built such a phenomenal product.
Okay, I can support that.
And the opportunity was there. Again, we had validated the opportunity. It was just, we needed a different business model. Is really what it came down to.
Right.
And
well, there's two other things I want to touch on, and we're going a little over time, so I don't want to take too much more of your time. But in regards to the confidence, were you somebody who, like, for example, did you come from a supportive family? By that I mean people are like, hey, you're the best at this, keep going, blah, blah, blah. Like, your parents were at every event or whatever it is. Like, did you come from this family where confidence was instilled in you, or did you happen to learn confidence along the way?
I think probably a combination of both. I think there's probably some kind of weird intrinsic thing for people like me.
And that's kind of getting, because I've
Things.
got friends who are uber confident, and then there are people on the other end of the spectrum. Like, I'm confident in very specific environments. Outside of that, not at all.
Well, it's funny. I'm the opposite, right? Walking into a big room and working the room isn't my strong suit, right? That's not what I'm really good at. So there's obviously different level, but I'm also not, afraid to go into the room. It's just not my personality to
Mm-hmm.
go in and be the big personality in the room. The so there, yeah, there's definitely some intrinsic thing. What drives me to be successful? I don't know. There's any particular, specific thing that does it. I think it's just there's just an innate, desire to push something through and be successful with it. And it still exists even now at EP with the products that I'm still responsible for, right? It's failure is not an option, right?
All right, but now you have two kids as well, right? And your kids are into hockey and stuff like that, and you're an avid athlete as well by way of cycling and things of that nature also. So how do you? Is it something? Is your intrinsic or innate skill set by way of confidence and desire to see something through to fruition? Is that something that you can, something you want to, something you attempt to pass down, or to, like, or are you just hoping that they also have, like, how do you communicate that down to your kids, saying, hey, look what I've done, you can do this as well? Or is that even part of your plan for
I
parenting?
think from that perspective, yeah, absolutely, right. It's really important to set realistic goals, right, and understand why you're pursuing those goals, and then work to achieve them, right. So they can be anything as simple as I want to ride 1,500 miles on my bike this summer, right. I've got 47 miles left to go.
Oh, damn.
I have
Congrats.
to
That's awesome.
figure out how to get the rides in between snowstorms now. But that was the goal, right? And I'm not quitting because it's now November, right? I got to find 2 more days where it's warm enough to get out on and do 2 more rides. And it's the same thing, with my teams, so with my kids, yeah, try to ascribe to that, self-motivated, goal-driven thing, right? It's not a function of living up to others' expectations. It's really operating within those expectations. That's just reality. But finding goals that you can control, and I think that's kind of a lot of the difference. Even in a big company like we work for now with Entertainment Partners, right? It is there's a lot of things going on all the time, all over the place that
Mm-hmm.
you have control over. And so it's finding the goals within the things you do have control over, and staying focused on those things. It's easy to get distracted, and it's there could be something that works for me because I'm not there all the time, right? It's easy not to get sucked into every single meeting and every conversation and get distracted by all that stuff. I go for 3 days, do what I need to do, come back, and I can focus on the things that I need to stay focused on. I don't get sucked into every meeting. So there could be something, in terms of that remote thing that actually works well, right? That helps, achieve some of that stuff. But it's, ultimately that, it is a leap of faith, right? It's, and that's a, you know, not something you can, put your finger on exactly what that
Mm-hmm.
is, right? It's, I'm jumping off this thing and I'm going to see it through.
I'm constantly impressed in general, just with the fact that people can be that confident in themselves to, again, like, it's easy for me, and I say this loosely, for me as an individual to go and say, hey, I'm going to go move to New York, I'm going to do whatever else, and if it fails, it fails, big deal. It's just me, meaning I'll figure out a way. I can get a roommate, and I'll do something on the cheap again, whatever. I can take a step back. When you have the responsibilities that you have by way of people who you employ, by way and your family and their families or whatever, to keep pushing forward, is something that I'm completely impressed by. Just because I don't, I mean, I'm not, I'm somebody who works out to kind of clear my head. You ride bicycles and things of that nature. I'm assuming there's some benefit there too. It's kind of, it's kind of soothing,
Absolutely.
if you will.
Yep.
Um, but the fact that you are able to do it still, for that matter, and still work in these three cities, in LA, live in Park City, and working there as well, obviously, and San Fran is impressive to say the least. So I thank you for the time in that level.
Absolutely.
And we'll probably have another conversation at some point in the future. But the fact that where you're at now versus where you started is interesting. And I know there's a bunch where we didn't get a chance to touch on based on time limitations. But I I hope you are successful in communicating whatever method of madness you have in your head to your kids or whomever else, because
Yeah, no,
it's kind of hard to do, I would assume.
yep. No, it absolutely is, and it's it's all part of the weirdness of living in a town like this, and I'm sure all towns are the same. You just see kind of all different parenting styles, and you get kind of the craziness around youth sports and craziness around colleges, and it's I my philosophy is you arm your children with as much confidence and guidance as you can so that they make the right decisions, right? Because at the end of the day, it has to be their decision, right? It has to be their passion. It has to be their desire. If they're doing something because you're pushing them to do it, right? Whether it's what college they go to or what sport they play or what level of sport they play at that level, they're not going to be into it. And you see this all the time, right? When kids get to college, they quit the sports that they've been playing since they were 5 because they're so done with it, right? Because they weren't into it. They were doing it because the parents were pushing them. And there's some degree of pushing that you have to do, right? But at the same time, it becomes kind of this obsession, a little bit.
Well, let me ask you one final question on that note
Sure.
itself. College or no college, does it matter to you as a parent if your kids go?
If my kids came to me and said, "Hey, I don't want to go to college," and they laid out a reasonable argument of why they didn't want to, either ever or right now, I would certainly listen. Because again, not that you should just let them do whatever the hell they want to do and all kinds of stuff, but at the same time, they kind of need to own. They need to own it to a degree that you can let them own it, right? They're 14, so you can let them own everything.
Agreed, yeah.
But, if they're going to be successful in life, right, they can't wait until they're 30 to figure out what's important to them. And I think you're seeing a lot of kind of that going on right now, with certain groups of people.
No, definitely. And you've definitely been a pioneer in that industry as well. That's allowed kids, or anybody for that matter, to do things that they couldn't do before till they were 40, but now they can do it at 14.
Right.
So there's a different one out there. But thank you again for the time, Darren. Much appreciated. For those of you who happen to be in the entertainment space, you probably have or will use Scenechronize. So this is the guy behind the guy behind the guy. He's the one who made it happen. So if you have any problems, you can contact Darren directly. But thanks for the time, man. I really appreciate it. Enjoy Park City.
All right.
And I'll see you out there in January, if not before.
Awesome.
All right, take it easy, man. Thank you again.
Okay, bye.
Bye.